So I actually got a day off from work today, and I stumbled across an old series that I hadn't seen in ages. It was made back in the late '60s. I believe it was 1967 when it came out, and it was kind of interesting how it's just as relevant today as it was back then. But it was called The Prisoner, played by Patrick McGowan. The plot was pretty simple in terms of what it was about. It was about a man who worked for an agency. We never found out who it was. We never found out what he did. We never found out anything about the details of his job or anything else, but he abruptly walks in and resigns, and he wakes up the next day in this place called The Village. And the Village is a bit of a weird place. I mean, it was the 1960s, but it's quite surreal, almost borderline psychedelic in some parts of it. And but it's a place, apparently, where he's put because he resigned. Apparently, whatever it was he was doing was too important for him to be able to quit. And the main reason he's in this village, and in fact, the main reason everybody is in that village, is because they did something for their government or agency or whoever. They left that deliberately ambiguous, and I think that was really, really genius, because you were able to make a commentary without making a political statement with it. But everybody was there for one purpose only, to have their will broken to the point they would confess the information that the village wants. We don't know who the village is run by, unless you want to go by the very last episode in the series, which people still debate on what it was about. But we don't know who it's run by. We don't know what government is in charge of it. We don't know really anything other than the information that McGowan is given. And he's not given a name even. We never learn that. He's just prisoner number 6. And at the beginning of every episode, it's a rehash, and they always say the same thing. We want information. And by hook or by crook, we're going to get that information. And you're number 6. That's, And McGowan, of course, says, I'm not a number. I won't be debriefed. I won't be cataloged. I won't be indexed, filed, stamped. My life is my own, and I'm a free man. And they sort of laugh at him in amusement that anybody could imagine themselves being free. But the interesting parallels I noticed and it was done, like I said, brilliantly, because it was done in a subtle way. It wasn't in an overt kind of in your face, this is what we're trying to tell you. It wasn't we're commenting on the state of politics today. It wasn't we're commenting on it wasn't even necessarily a political thing. To me, the overlapping theme of the entire series, and I didn't get to watch all the episodes today. I just found it and hadn't seen it, like I said, God, forever. I was probably still a teenager when it was reran on TV one time, and I don't think I even paid much attention to it back then because I was just really fascinated with it on this go around. But the main crux of the situation is the struggle of the individual and whatever society, be it the village, be it AA, be it anything else you might want to put into that. The struggle against being forced to conform to something they don't believe in, and the desire to be individual in a community or in a situation where that's not tolerated and that's not allowed. There were a lot of clever lines I picked up that I thought were just really clever in the writing itself. There's one where the person in charge of the village, there's a different one every week, tells him, this is a free place. This place is totally free. You're free to do whatever you'd like. You have your own house. You're free to do whatever you want throughout the day. Everything is totally free here. We even have democratic elections. That's how free we are here. And he kind of responds, well, you're free so long as you do exactly what you want me to do. As long as you do what you guys want, then I'm free. As long as I give you the information you really want, then I would be free. But in effect, you're free to do what you like, as long as you stay within the boundaries of the rules, and as long as you don't step outside the desired territories, and as long as you don't ask any questions. There's a state slogan I remember in the place. It says, questions are a burden to others, and answers are a prison for oneself, and that a still tongue makes a happy life. You can see exactly kind of why I was drawn to all that, given the content matter of this channel and everything. It was even in one episode, he was allowed to run democratically to be in charge of the actual village. And of course, he's driven almost insane by all their brainwashing and their various methods they use on him. And in the very end of that one, he actually grabs the controls to the entire village, and he's like, I'm in charge now. I'm at the helm. I've got the machines. We can all walk out of here free. And everybody kind of looks at him and kind of shrugs it off and just keeps right on going on about their business. It would be one that, I mean, if you're in the mood to see something a little different and not the typical type thing, it would be definitely something I'd recommend looking. I think a lot of it's on YouTube even now. But it kind of occurred to me that in context of, and I'm going to use it just for AA only in this, is that I recently had somebody that got real pissed off at me on a social media platform, and I want to address that. Not just what they said, but also a couple of things in this video, is that, they got banned from a group that I'm kind of an administrator in, because they had said there's no leaders in AA, there's nothing, you can do whatever you like in AA, it's not a cult. Kind of like the prisoner, you can do whatever you want in the village, just as long as you don't disobey any rules, you're free to do what you like. And of course, I've had accusations about, freedom of speech and all that other stuff, which I'm getting too far ahead of myself here, so let me take one issue at a time with that. When you say that you're free to do what you like in AA, there's not a written law in terms of like armed security and enforcement, or like in the series The Prisoner, where they used these weather balloons. Believe it or not, it actually works in the context of the series with these weather balloons that just kind of come along and kill you, or they come along and they abduct you and take you to whatever holding facilities they have. There's no law in AA in terms of like an armed force that'll come into your house in the middle of the night and beat you down. Or arrest you, or there's no such thing that puts you in an isolated place where you're living on a compound and in no contact with the outside world. That is true. But social pressure is another thing entirely, isn't it? It's kind of like when you're, say, in the village on The Prisoner, where you can't trust anybody and everybody who surrounds you is a part of it, or seems to be indirectly complicit in what goes on in the village. You can't really build any network of trust with anyone, and they keep you in control. They don't have to have armed security in AA. They don't have to have a compound out in the middle of nowhere. They don't have to do those things because they've got you by hook or crook, to quote the series. They've got you through fear and intimidation and terror that if you leave, or if you question the authority of the dogmatic big book, or if you question the elders, you'll get drunk again and you will die. They've got you believing that subtly that your life was in utter hell before you got to us. Now you're not getting drunk anymore. Now you're not high on drugs anymore. Now you're not walking the streets trying to cop. Now you're not waking up in the morning at 6 a.m. and hitting the bottle. You should be eternally grateful to us for the rest of your life. Otherwise, if you do not, you're going to go right back to that. And we know this because our literature says it. We know this because we've seen hundreds of people like you come through our doors that refuse to conform to our way of life. And like it says right here in our literature, if you don't conform, you're going to die. We have watched this over and over again. Nobody has ever successfully moderated. There's no other program out there that's going to help you. This is the last option left for you. If you are seriously alcoholic, or if you're seriously addicted, there is no other saving method, but you're free to do whatever you want. You're free to believe whatever you want. You don't have to work the steps, but if you don't work them, we'll just say this. Everybody we've ever seen come in here that didn't conform to our way of life and work the steps and get a sponsor, they're all out there walking around drunk right now, and many of them are dead. Many of them have committed suicide. And many of them, are in just horrifying shape, all because they couldn't swallow their pride and conform to our simple way of life. That just, all it is a real simple program that'll help you have a life beyond your wildest dreams. But you're free to believe whatever you want. You're free to do whatever you want. You don't have any leaders. Just let's not pretend that reading the same exact stuff at the beginning of every meeting has anything to do with anything. Let's pretend that there's not really an elite group of old timers that seem to be at the core of every single home group that you sort of answer to, that sort of determines who's going to talk and who's not going to talk. Let's pretend that we don't see the same chair people in the same seats at the same meetings over and over again, calling on the exact people. Let's pretend that we don't go to meetings and see the amount of being ostracized that you can be if you're a chronic relapser, or how you're kind of relegated to, don't talk to that guy. That guy fucking drinks. That guy can't even stay sober 2 months. We need to stay away from him. People like that drag you down. People like that will infect your mind and poison your brain and cause you to stop working steps and doing the program, and you could go right back to being what you were before you got here. And you don't want that to happen, do you? You don't want to die drunk, do you? Like so many other thousands of drunks that we've seen before you. You wouldn't want that to happen, would you? I mean, you can let that happen. It's entirely up to you. You have a choice. But I know for me, when I got here, I was ready to not be like that anymore. That guy might even commit suicide pretty soon, and you'll be committing suicide right behind him. But you're free to believe whatever you want. You don't have any leaders. You don't have any absolutes. You don't have any dictums, like what's in the big book where it says you have to conform to our way of life or die. You don't have anything in the big book that says things like, unless you swallow your pride and do these inventories, you'll get drunk again. Or that part in the big book where it says if you don't do the fifth step, if you skip that vital step, you'll never overcome drinking. But you're free to believe whatever you want at any given time. You can leave. There's no rules. You can share whatever you like. It's just that if you don't share the lingo, the AA lingo, and you don't share the solution, as they talk about in the meetings, you won't get called on. You won't have any friends. You'll have nobody to communicate with. And after all, the outside world doesn't understand you because you were drunk. They don't understand drunks in the outside world. We do. We understand drunks really well. And you can believe whatever you like, but we're going to tell you right now, if you don't conform and you don't swallow your pride and you don't get up off your ego and start doing what these programs and this book suggests and teaches, it's going to be bad news for you. I mean, you'll end up dead. You'll end up dead drunk. You'll end up in jail. You'll end up in institutions and asylums. But you're free to believe whatever the fuck you want. Sounds a little bit interesting how freedom seems to mean an entirely different thing to them than it does to me, for example. You could go into a meeting technically and say, I haven't drank in 10, 20 years, let's just say, and I never worked a step and I never had a sponsor. See how you're received. See what happens when the next few people who are called on after you. It was like an individual said in one of his postings in a particular group that I'm involved in. He said that he shared one time in a meeting he was an atheist. And he said no matter what he said, from that day forward, anytime he shared the meeting, there were like 6 people right after him that had to just pile right in on every word he said and attack everything he said. And I found that to be very true, regardless, of whatever you have that deviates from the cult itself. Yeah, I had a discussion with someone who was religious several years ago, and I'd never thought about it. And like I said, I'm not an atheist, but I'm not religious in like Christianity or anything like that. But he was a Christian, and I remember him saying, that I get it just as bad as the atheists do in AA, because if I share anything about being a Christian, and he was right in one way. I happen to think of all the meetings where I'd see people say stuff like, spirituality is for people who've already been to hell, church is for people who are afraid to go to hell, or, whatever. I can name a billion different slogans, like I've said on these videos before, but there is a veneer, there is a hint underneath the surface. We're better than all the religions, but you're free to believe in whatever higher power you want. You're free to pray to whatever you want. You can pray to this chair right here, so long as this chair tells you need to work a 4th step, you need to do a 5th step, you need to be in meetings every day, you need to look at your part in everything that's ever happened to you, including if you've been held up or robbed, or if you've ever been assaulted for no good reason, or if you've ever had someone break into your house and steal all your things. You need to pray to this chair if this chair is your higher power, but the chair is going to have to agree with the AA literature. But it's a free society without leaders where you can believe whatever you want. And I think I've driven my point home a little bit with that. In terms of free speech, there was an argument And, you know, I'm pretty much all for free speech. I'm not going to be like the Village. But when it comes to certain organizations or certain groups, for example, like take a certain social media group that's primarily composed of people who have left AA, who are leaving AA, and a majority of them have been damaged by AA or have been, you know, they've been through the ringer with AA, so they really don't want to hear AA garbage any longer. There's nothing preventing AA people, and they have it already, from having their own groups. There's nothing to prevent groups from starting that allow AA members and anti-AA members if they want to have that type of discussion. But I've seen enough groups in my time doing this where in the name of free speech, you start letting in pro-AA people, and you start letting pro-AA people do all the posting, and you let pro-AA people attack people anytime they say anything, and you no longer have free speech. What you have is a group that's pro-AA under the name of being anti-AA, but is completely taken over by AA people, and the people that the group is designed for, the group that it should be helping, the people who are trying to leave AA, get out of AA, deprogram, if you want to use that word, from AA, they're not getting the voice that they need on that. And I don't feel that that's a violation of a so-called free speech, because I'm not suppressing anybody's right to say whatever they like. I mean, there's people that talk horrible about me out there, I'm sure, and it doesn't really matter. But they will anyway, no matter what you do. But, you know, I mean, what if I said every time let me grab some issues out of the area. What if I said every time the pro-choice people want to have a march, they have to have at least half of the crowd be pro-life in order to balance it out in the name of free speech? What if I said anytime the pro-life people have a march, they have to have 50% pro-choice people there as well to balance out the free speech? What if I said that every Republican convention, you need half of the convention to be Democratic to balance out the free speech? What if I said every Democratic convention, you need at least 50% Republicans there to heckle the speakers and whatever on either side of the aisle in the name of free speech? It wouldn't work really well, I don't think, because even though there's nothing wrong with people freely expressing their opinion wherever they may like, it does not mean that certain organizations or certain places or certain pages has the right to allow those opinions. I mean, I don't think if you were, say, a group of African Americans on social media and you had a guy that said, I need to join this group and I'm a Klans member, and if you don't let me in, you're violating my free speech, I don't think anybody would argue the absolute idiocy of that. And so it's that type of thing that I'm saying about, you know, if you have a group that's for people that are leaving AA and for people getting away from AA, the last thing they need is more AA preaching. And as long as I admin a certain group out there, some people know who it is, I don't want to advertise it or anything like that, but that's just the way I look at it. I don't see free speech as allowing people to overrun a group and fill it full of pro-AA garbage when that's not what the group is about. So anyway, that's the other video I promised for this week. Hopefully I'll be able to see you guys soon. And if you get a chance, check out The Prisoner. I recommend it anyway.